Tell you, God bless Acrobat. No matter how many times I stop its service, it still starts off somewhere. There's just no way of killing that service. It's like a Terminator. It's just relentless. I don't know how many other ways I can kill the Acrobat updater service. It just comes back. Hello and welcome. My name is Richard Simon. I am Cloud Therapist. First, I wish all my subscribers a Happy New Year. I hope you've all enjoyed your Christmas break, whatever you were doing. And I certainly hope that 2026 is going to be a healthy and prosperous year for you all. To anyone else watching this video, welcome. I hope you're going to enjoy this particular talk. I hope you enjoy it so much to actually consider maybe subscribing to the channel as well. That would be really appreciated. I have a great set of information for you, all set out for 2026. We're going to be talking all about the predictions for this year from various people. So make sure that you watch the whole video to get everything and learn all about what's coming up in this particular year. So in the January 2026 episode of Cloud State of Play, which is what this is, we traditionally kind of do a projections episode. So this is where we basically look at and get a chance to look at some of the projections that we did last year for 2025, but also we focus on the upcoming year and see what's actually in store for us in 2026. As always, I have the perennial Paul Bevan with me. Paul is now retired, not retired. That's his title, folks. So we'll have to get used to that for 2026. I won't say anything more about that. But yeah, let's welcome Paul first. Paul, how are you doing? Happy New Year.
I'm fine. Yeah, Happy New Year to you and everybody else who's watching. Yeah, doing fine. Looking forward to the year. See what it brings up. I think it will be an interesting ride this year.
Fantastic. So do you have a good Christmas and break, or is that kind of long distant memory now?
It does seem a long way back, but yeah, a lovely time. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Okay, so you're ready for another 12 episodes of Cloud State of Play for the year.
As I'll ever be.
As you'll ever be. Yeah. Actually, Paul and I are going to be hopefully doing a little bit more stuff for 2026. So watch out for some of the other videos that we'll be working on together. I'm not sure Paul knows all the details yet, but everything will be revealed at some point.
Now you know why I'm retired, not retired.
Exactly. Yes, that's one of the reasons why you're the not retired part of the retired aspect of it. Okay. So as I said earlier, we don't do predictions. We do projections. And there's a good reason why we actually do projections in this particular episode of Cloud State of Play. Now, if you want to know the difference between those, I'll try and drop something in the description of the video. So do go and check that out. We try to kind of focus on projections. I think we feel that's kind of a much better way to actually do things. But suffice to say that those who do make the predictions do kind of stick their neck out, a little bit more when you're doing that rather than projections. So good luck to them, and we will be critiquing all of that as we go forward. Okay, so normally we don't kind of really do a bunch of categories for our projections, but we thought we'd kind of maybe just coalesce some of the ideas around a number of categories for this year. So we've come up with a bunch of those, and I'll try and go through those with you in a moment. Okay, so for this particular episode of Cloud State of Play, the January 2026 projections episode with Paul Bevan, the categories that we've going to go for the projections are: 1, DevOps and platform engineering; 2, generative AI, so really kind of having a collective view of that; number 3, observability; number 4, cloud repatriation or sovereignty. I think those two kind of seem to be combining. We'll explain a little bit more about that later. Number 5, Supercloud, or really any other category, or whether anything else Paul may have to bring in Paul's choice in that number 5. And number 6, cloud security and networking. Again, much underrated. Number 7, open source software and cloud native. So again, we'll maybe look at some areas around those. And number 8, cloud economics. That's things like FinOps and cost management and so on. Number 9, cloud data management, cloud data storage, and cloud data fabric. So all of those kind of things all put together and focusing on different areas of those. Number 10, data center. So again, data center is kind of coming back a lot this year, folks. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Number 11, mergers and acquisitions, or M&A. And then number 12, we'll look at some of the IT industry predictions, some of the pundits and analysts and consulting houses and kind of what they've come up with as well. So those are our 12 categories. I don't think we're going to be able to do many of these reports and predictions justice, but our projections certainly will be along the way, as part of the discussion. Let's see what we come up with on that. But before we do that, here is a quick channel message for you. Did you know that 80% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet to this channel? Come on, guys, we can do better, surely. So please hit subscribe and the notification bell. It costs nothing, but it really helps me to keep making more videos for you. All right, back to the therapy session. Now, before we go on to the 2026 projections, let's actually have a quick look at our projections for 2025 and how did we do? So looking back at our projections for 2025, let's do a quick review of that, guys. In the DevOps and platform engineering space, we said there would be probably more erosion of development roles, development jobs. Easily by the end of the year, we said the junior developer role will be threatened by automation. I guess to a large degree that has happened, but it's not really happened from kind of the AI code gen space, but more actually from things like vibe coding. I think that's kind of where that seems to be coming in from. And that's kind of, I think, what we'll see what happens in 2026, right? In generative AI, unfortunately, my aiml ideas, that's the AI model economics, as I called it, hasn't happened or didn't happen in 2025. I'm hoping that something along those lines will come into 2026, but we'll see. AGI never came about. I think we discussed this a little bit as well. So that's not really one of the projections for 2025. But certainly now been put out to something like 2030 or 2035, according to some of the articles and reports that we picked up on. If you actually want to get more information on that, and by the way, that does sound reasonable. And if you do want to get some more information on that, look at the Cloud State of Play episode for, I think, July 2025 that I did with Sarah Bonin, and you'll see some discussion around AGI in one of the reports that we looked at there. Now, in terms of Agentic AI, we were talking, I think, about AI agents maybe doomed to fail in 2025. At least that was one of the Newsstack articles that appeared last year. And yes, I mean, I think the issues that we had in 2025 will continue in 2026. It still kind of gets better. So things like the lack of true autonomy and kind of limited reasoning, integration issues for the agents, data still remains largely siloed, so it's kind of difficult for agents to get to it. The hype versus reality, so kind of people talk about agentic AI, but really we're just kind of looking at AI agents. So yeah, I think largely the projections I think that we had were relatively good. I think they were sort of true. AI agents or agentic AI kind of remains as a hype, and AI agents have kind of really come in a lot more. But again, not as kind of standalone, although you can kind of look at Clawbot and various other ones, but more of a kind of an augmentation to existing applications. So that's kind of really what's happened, I think, in 2025. And again, largely similar to what happened to Gen AI in general back in 2023 and 2024, mainly. So actually, all of that sort of AI stuff is augmenting existing application platforms. So it's not kind of AI agents running around your network, doing stuff all by themselves. It's actually within certain applications. Now, we also, I think, mentioned Gemini versus intelligence. Well, actually, that's kind of turned on its head, because obviously Apple has signed with Google and to effectively make Gemini the new Siri. So that's been a surprise. That was certainly not part of, I think, any predictions or projections from anybody from last year. Observability, more conformity to open standards like OTel. We haven't really seen a great deal more of that. I think there's been some adoption around that. But what we didn't, I think, see is the likes of Gartner and others pushing Gen AI to actually come into the AI ops space. So effectively kind of making that Gen AI ops, as I would call it. So that's interesting, and I think that's quite welcome. Around cloud repatriation, what cloud repatriation? We've not really seen a lot of that. It's kind of largely been forgotten because of things like AI agents kind of taking center stage on on those things. So yeah, and I don't want to kind of go into the whole sort of cloud repatriation debate here, but to me it's been kind of put to one side, just like sustainability has been over the last 2 years or so. Supercloud, I think the only difference that I saw here, there's certainly all the usual tools that we mentioned for 2025, but the new one that I kind of picked up on a little bit more in 2025 was HPE's Morpheus. So again, I saw a demo of that, and I may be able to do something with that on the channel in the future. We'll see. But that was interesting, definitely. In terms of open source, open source has kind of put itself into the into the middle of the sort of the Gen AI space. So again, it's kind of making or trying to make sort of Kubernetes the de facto standard way to really do Gen AI. And we said that effectively open source will get a shot in the arm from Gen AI models being open sourced and it's becoming kind of the standard platform for doing Gen AI. And I guess that's largely right. So I think we got that projection quite right there. Cloud economics, as I said earlier, AIML never happened. So my AI sort of model economics didn't really happen. FinOps is kind of largely gone the same way as it was kind of doing the last few years. I did attend an event actually by Flexera, I think in 2025, and the focus from them on FinOps was bringing ITAM and SAM, so that's software asset management, I believe that's what that stands for, into the into the FinOps category, or into the FinOps fold. And I found that really a strange thing to focus on. I would have really kind of gone more around cloud cost optimization, continuous profiling, and really embracing those as part of this sort of the FinOps movement. But anyway, what do I know? Cloud data management, number 9. We tried to kind of make some sense of how enterprise is going to be preparing their data for Gen AI projects. I spoke to DataOps Live and Snowflake, and that discussion I think is still ongoing. And the whole sort of managing data, preparing it for AI and so on, I think has continued to be a difficulty, a challenge for enterprises, and quite nebulous in terms of how you achieve that. So again, largely correct in terms of the projection for that there would still be challenges in cloud data management. I think we talked about the state of data report from is it Hakoda in 2025. We may look at this again for this year, so we'll see kind of whether anything's changed, and then hopefully more insights from the videos around Big Data London 2025, which I have recorded some footage for. So if you're watching this much later, it should already be out on the channel, or if you're just watching this as I've released this particular video, then watch out for that later on in 2026. I did a review interview with Dr. Joe Perez at Big Data London 2025. So again, that review will be coming out on the channel. Watch out for that. In terms of competing, well, Intel didn't get broken up. We said that would get probably broken up for in 2025. It might still happen, you never know. So maybe we're just kind of a bit too premature on that. But they kind of seem to be trying to fight back a little bit. So I guess that's good. But we'll see what happens with that. But certainly no breakup of Intel yet. Okay. And then we talked about NVIDIA will continue its dominance in 2025. That certainly was true. That projection was correct. And we said we may see some new startup contenders coming in. So we didn't really see anybody kind of in massive sort of terms appearing. But certainly the likes of ASML and NVIDIA's investment in Grok. So that's G-R-O-Q, not G-R-O-K. So not the XAI kind of models and so on, but the company called Grok, G-R-O-Q. NVIDIA invested $20 billion in that, and that was in 2025, late 2025, and that is a inference company. So we did mention inference would come in a lot more, so we were actually right in that particular projection, and I think that investment by NVIDIA into Grok is an affirmation of that. So I think that's kind of the main highlights of it. Now let's get back to the main video. So our first category for the projections of 2026 is DevOps and platform engineering. Now, I picked on the platform engineering org. They came up with I think top 10 predictions for 2026 in platform engineering, and considering that really everybody is kind of abandoning DevOps these days and talking more about platform engineering, we thought we'll kind of maybe focus on that. Now, again, I'm not going to be able to do this actual report justice. We'll drop the link in the description of the video. Paul, let me kind of get you started maybe on that, or any sort of general observation around platform engineering, and then I'll maybe come in with a few points from the platform engineering org's predictions.
Well, it's not really a great area of sort of focus or expertise for me, so I should be careful about what I say here. I've always taken the view that DevOps was really more about the developers than it was about operations. And I think, in your discussions with me around platform engineering during the course of last year, I think we came to understand that actually this is getting a more architected approach towards doing things. And so, yeah, I agree. I think, DevOps as a sort of term is probably going to disappear over time, I think, particularly with, you get machine learning coming in, and we're talking about what platform engineering is going to do in the coming year in terms of pulling in the whole sort of AI, machine learning operations type space into it. And there'll be a theme that comes out, I think, across the year too, around this is the year that everybody needs to get to grips with the sort of implications of speed versus inertia, and
Right.
we'll come back and discuss that later. So from my perspective, I won't be sorry to see the back of the term DevOps, put it like that.
Yeah. I think everybody's I think everybody's kind of pretty much in agreement on that. I mean, it's I don't really necessarily care what they call it, but I think the kind of the guiding principles of what Agile and DevOps originally, the original DevOps kind of wanted to achieve, are still important. Now, I don't know whether platform engineering specifically is the right way to go, but looking at the platform engineering, because we're not kind of here to philosophically discuss that, but platform engineering orgs sort of predictions, they get everything from really sort of agentic infrastructure, they say, becomes standard architecture. Platforms become the safety net for AI generated code, which I do agree with.
I agree with that.
I think that's kind of be the catch-all sort of aspect of it. Self-healing evolves into kind of self-architecture. Yes, I think we might see a little bit of that kind of dynamic reconfiguration of infrastructure for cost efficiency, they say. DevOps and ML ops converge. Yes, I would agree with that as well. It's kind of all becomes, ML ops really becomes kind of part of the workflows that you have in DevOps. FinOps becomes a hard requirement. I would probably say it actually needs to be integrated. It's kind of part of the architecture, or that at least that sort of cloud economics aspect of it is. Anyway, so those are kind of
I agree with you on that one. And particularly when I read that, it's almost like the sort of AI version of the CFO says no.
Yeah.
And it was no, it's not a separate standalone. It really needs to be embedded in. And
yes,
as you say, we're not going to discuss the whys and wherefores today, but maybe they'll come back round the loop on that.
Yeah, and I think it may not be something that you have to do in FinOps or FinOps's APIs or Cloud Cost Management's API specifically. It actually may be just policy as code that will do that. So our sort of established, sort of pack capabilities that we've had may be able to dictate that sort of whole cost management and cloud economics thing. So it gets architected as policy as code, not as specifically kind of FinOps. I'd certainly want to see that for this year. But yeah, platform engineering, orgs that are a full comprehensive report. Like I said, those were kind of some of the main areas there. And then it says, things like the platforms become existential. I guess I don't think we have a way to maybe get around that. And things like compliance shifts to governance by default. Yeah, but I mean, these are all part of the standardization of platform engineering anyway, that PE brings in anyway. So and certainly the rise of things like certification and professional attainment emerges as well for this year. So yeah, you will probably see more PE certified people than maybe kind of DevOps engineer type roles as well. Okay, so that's the first category. Now, second category, generative AI. I don't know where to start with that one. Well, let's start with Google actually did a Google AI Agents Trends 2026 report. Now, again, this is quite a heavy PDF document. I think, as we've noticed, Google tends to do. So lots of lovely graphics on the side, and then some text on the other side of the page. And this is kind of really focusing more on AI agents, and I think it's maybe a good category to go with. Paul, did you get a chance to have a look at that, or anything else in this specific category for you about Gen AI?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that the focus is going to be on agentic AI this year, and I think that's a given. And I think there's a lot of barriers that agentic AI has got together. Because I was looking at a particular Dynatrace sort of set of topics that they were talking about for 2026, and one of the things that they mentioned in part of their system, their sort of review and sort of look forward, was getting to grips with the error rates when you start merging AI, making AI agents, agentic AI work in sort of concert.
Right.
And I think we've, back in something we talked about last year, I probably pointed you at a article that one of my colleagues at Bloor, Andy Haler, had written around the sort of compound effect of agentic AI working in sort of concert has, that you sort of compound the error rates and it gets a bit hairy. And it was interesting to get somebody who's a company that's actually working closely in the area to use agents in a sort of, and we'll come on to observability later. So I think just looking at and I did get a good look at the Google report. As you say, it's sort of fairly heavy, needs a fair amount of thing. But I think the issue is, and there's a Deloitte projections too that sort of says it's worth X billion by 2030, quote unquote, as long as organizations and vendors deal with the orchestration issues.
That's a big if.
That's a big if. So again, I think
and very broad as well.
Very broad.
Kind of very...
Oh yeah, but fundamentally, we're going to get this year a lot of people saying it's the year of agentic AI. Yeah. And there'll be another side saying, yeah, but only if you get the data right, the orchestration right, all the sorts of the security right, all those sort of things. And so I'm less. I still, it's going to happen. I'm slightly skeptical of how quickly that will happen in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the real year for AI agents. I think I don't even want to hear about agentic AI because that's just so far out. People are kind of throwing in the term marketing and all the LinkedIn, shills and influencers and what have you, but I think it's a load of nonsense. So I think it's AI agents and actually making AI agents work. Last year we discovered AI agents in 2025. I think this year we're actually going to have a go at making them work. And the report from Google about AI agent trends for this year. So it says agents for every employee. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's nonsense. That's one of the points. Agents for every workflow, maybe, but I think only workflows that are within a particular app that you're using. So your, DevOps, platform engineering, your CI/CD, or your observability, kind of that auto remediation that we talked about, and things like that. So it's kind of operates, it springs up, it operates, it does something, and then it switches off again, or just sits there and waits for the next event. Not something that's just continuously going, oh yeah, and I found you a cheaper holiday, or actually have you found an even cheaper holiday? Oh, actually I found you an even cheaper holiday. So you started it in New York, and then you kind of actually found you one in Cairo, and then another one in, and it's not going to do that. I think it's not that kind of sort of agent capability, but it's more for employees specifically, you already have Copilot. So maybe the proliferation of things like Copilot and what they would probably hope to be in a Google Workspace with with Gemini and things like that. But generally speaking, I think you're just going to see it in that type of activity for point one. Point two, for the workflows, like I said, I think it's going to be within a particular workflow, not kind of just a generic one that you just throw at whatever you want it to do and kind of say, oh yeah, I can run whatever workflow you want. No. It's the workflow that does the auto remediation within my observability tool. It's the workflow that calculates my the security within my DevOps CI/CD pipeline, or something like that. So it's going to be doing specific jobs within something, and you could call that a workflow. But I think it's not going to be kind of just a generic agent that just does you can throw it at any workflow. I think that's not really. I just don't feel that that's kind of how this is going to operate.
I think what we're going to hear a lot more about in 2026 is the term intent. Intent-based. We talked about trying to get business and technology to work better together, and this whole idea of you use the business intent to drive the workflow, to drive the agent, to give you an outcome and an output that is business oriented. So get it to the intent. And back to the employee one, I think there's some interesting things going on there, in the sense that it's got to be in 2026 about how you make it easier for the if you have to spend too much time working out how to make your agent work for you, employees are not going to use it. And users are not, end users, consumers are not going to use it, as witnessed by some of the disappointing figures for AI PCs. They're going, I don't really want to get involved in, having to, to program my flipping PC to give me what I want in terms of a workflow.
And I mean, again, there's always a consumer side of this, right, Paul? So there's always the consumer version of these things, and whether I don't know whether that comes through. I'm not really sure. We'll see how that works out.
I mean, and again, we're doing projections, not predictions, but again, we've seen how consumerization has driven technology over the last probably 20 years. And I still think it'll play here. Whether it plays to quite the same degree, I don't know.
Yeah. And there's a lot more in the Google AI Agents Trends 2026 report, guys. Again, link in the description for that. They go on to talk about agents for your customers. They talk about agents for security. So agents will evolve security operations by automating threat detection, triage, and response. I mean, I like the idea of, we talked about this under observability, right? And even I think in some of our previous episodes, we talked about, Gartner's sort of advocating for the same thing about, auto remediation or taking actions, proactive actions on things. So this whole kind of, detection, triage, and response, reducing alert fatigue and so on. Yeah, that's fine. I think that's quite welcome. That kind of, elevating human analysts to strategic defenders and so on. That's all fine. I think that all makes sense. But yeah, I just feel that it's going to be still embedded. It's not one of those things where you just set it off on your network and you just say, okay, I'll just put my feet up and make a cup of tea or coffee and come back later and it'll all be done for me. It'll be, within a particular workflow. I think that's how it's going to work. Okay, and then we had another one in this space from Andreas Horn, who is the IBM head of AI Ops. Now, I'd probably say to Andreas first, you need to your title change to Gen AI Ops. That's probably the first thing to do. But he's come up with his own list as well, sort of top 8 predictions. So these went from Agentic AI will evolve from simple workflows to solving complex multi-step problems. I don't agree with that. Scientific, as we just said that. Scientific acceleration focuses on AI-assisted hypothesis. Sure, as we get more compute and AI factories, improved inference time, computing, sure, because we're talking a lot more about inference this year. Very large language models will scale to 50 trillion parameters. I don't really care about that as a benchmark war. Small, efficient, domain-specific AI models will grow in use. I guess so. I mean, SLMs for agents is kind of really the answer to that, I guess. Advanced AI use cases like AI Ops will proactively manage and resolve complex IT operations. Now, this is very close to what you and I have been talking about, Gen AI Ops, right? And that's why I said, Andreas, change your title. Gen AI Ops is a new term, or at least that's the term I'm using. And you heard it here, folks. Heard it here first. So I do agree with that. What's your take on those points?
Well, I think that last one, you're right. We did talk about it, and we're going to move into that in observability in a minute, I think. But the large language model versus the small language model, I think, is an interesting one.
Yeah.
How much, my view actually is I'm going the opposite way to you, I think, in the sense that I think small language models will be quite a growth area in 2026, and particularly for organizations, as they want to train agents, if they want to train and orchestrate agentic AI, and they are concerned around security, they're concerned around the privacy of their own data, I think they will use SLMs more and more. And I think we'll start to see a lot more of that they'll feed a lot of their corporate data in. Because a lot of LLMs at the moment, of course, aren't getting corporate data. So I think the SLMs will be about how do I maximize, and I can think of a number of areas, which way too long a discussion to go into now, where corporations, whether they're in the public or the private sectors, really could improve their operations no end by getting loading up SLMs with all the corporate data and really starting to make it work for them.
Right. Yeah. We'll see how that goes. I mean, those are two of the kind of the main ones that we had in that category, guys. So again, links in the description of the video, check those out. But I think for me, it's definitely, AI agents actually becoming integrated and being useful. I think the whole sort of Gen AI, like I said, sort of, model wars and whatever you want to call them, will continue the benchmarking and so on. Not going to see anything like AGI or ASI this year, despite what you might hear elsewhere. I think even some of the analyst firms have kind of put that out to another 5 to 10 years. Same thing really for kind of quantum and sort of a whole, quantum and Gen AI sort of combination. I think you'll maybe see some modest sort of capabilities, but again, even quantum is another sort of 5 to 10 years out. I think on that. But yeah, certainly a lot more kind of actual use of AI agents. That's kind of really what I see as the predominant thing for this year. And as we said, and as we've been saying for a number of episodes now, Gen AI Ops, we want observability to, pull up its socks and be able to do auto remediation, but also do the AI Ops part of it by bringing in Gen AI as part of that. For that and a lot more, we've covered this in the past previous episodes. Again, I'll try and include some stuff for you in the description of the video. Okay, category 3 is observability, Paul. Now, I shared with you a number of sort of predictions for this year. The one I picked on was really logs.io. I kind of wanted to highlight Asaf Yigal, who is the co-founder and VP of product engineering, I think, at logs.io. So he's kind of done his predictions, and the top 4 kind of items I picked up on is AI in dev and observability is post the first hype. Yeah, I agree with that, I guess. It's kind of a little bit further. Engineering teams understand that AI is not going to do everything anytime soon, I guess. So that's kind of one of the points. Second one is AI and observability workflows. Now, we already said that. Again, this is converging to our point. Number 3, observability intelligence layer. So this is, again, I think, the Gen AI ops sort of description. And then observability expands to new roles. Now, he's saying organizations understand that AI lowers the barrier to understanding and analyzing data. So in 2026, AI will be used to explore data, ask questions. There we go. This is what I was saying about me being able to ask questions of my observability platform. Paul, what's your take on it?
I think that is very much the next, if you like, the next frontier that they've got to get over. You literally, we've been talking about, AI ops being able to predict, problems coming up or being, and all those sort of things. And really, it hasn't happened. It's still glorified, reducing sort of ticket load, etc., all that sort of stuff, rather than real predictions about what's going on. And I think that ability to say, tell me where I've got a particular risk at the moment, and also tell me what's not quite working properly, which could cause problems downstream. And we're not even seeing that properly.
Right.
But the other area too, and this is sort of, you come at it from logs.io and versus Dynatrace and Grafana Labs, is this whole thing about what was observability about originally, and I'm not going to go back to networks because that's where the observability piece originally came from, but that's historic now, and I leave it out. But observability has been very much a DevOps type, how the heck do we, manage that CI/CD pipeline and see what's going on in it?
Right.
And yet, you've 2 out of 3 of the pieces you put up are actually from people who are in what I call IT operations monitoring. It's not, and that's where they came from. Dynatrace, Grafana Labs, etc.
Sure.
They've come from that sort of monitoring space and moved into it, and we discussed this in 2025, probably ad nauseum, in that it's become a very misunderstood term, and everybody's using observability. And for goodness sake, what are we going to do to get around that? And I'm not sure what the answer is to that, but certainly what you just highlighted at the end, this whole ability to say, what do I need to be worried about today and tomorrow? It's almost the thing that you want to do, rather than oh dear, it happened, now tell me how to fix it.
Absolutely.
It's still there, and I mean, I've got a call with Big Panda later today, and it'd be interesting to see where they're at with this one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the other 2 that we quite rightly we picked on was Dynatrace. They have a 2026 predictions by a guy called Bernd Greifender. Apologies if I'm butchering that. He's a chief innovator at Dynatrace, I believe. So he's talking about why agentic AI observability is imperative. And again, that's all converging to the same points, really. Putting AI into observability, specifically generative AI into observability. And he kind of comes up with 5 or 6 points as well. So agentic AI introduces unprecedented system complexity, requiring strong observability and governance. Yes, I guess that makes sense. Enterprise will progress through maturity stages of automation, predictive operations, supervised autonomy, and so on before achieving fully autonomous operations. Goes on to talk about resilience, defined as a system's ability to absorb disruption and recover quickly, will become the key benchmark for operational excellence. Again, I think we've disagreed on that in the past because we said it's high availability, not resilience. And then reliable AI foundations with deterministic grounding and end-to-end observability are essential to prevent compounded errors in complex agentic systems. I think this is kind of focusing a lot more on managing AI agents and Gen AI models than actually kind of observability, in general. But fair enough. I think that's kind of the focus that this guy from Dynatrace is offering.
I think that one of the challenges I think we've got in this whole space is that there's a whole area of that that's become very much a commoditized environment. And what we're seeing is a number of organizations, and Dynatrace is one of them, trying to carve out specific new niches for themselves. So I think it's going to get slightly confusing again. That's the problem. How you manage agentic AI is a very separate discussion. I think it's closer clearly to application monitoring and application observability than it is to IT ops. So I think we're going to have to be careful about where we see this happening, because it'll just will lose the will to live, I think, if they keep marrying it all together.
Yeah, and there needs to be a distinction between using AI or Gen AI in observability and observability observing or monitoring Gen AI.
Yes,
yeah?
absolutely.
I think I'm kind of not a conflation yet, but I'm seeing a little bit of that. And you know what the influencers are like? They're going to pick that up and just run with it this year.
Yeah, no, you've actually articulated that much better than I did, because that's exactly what I was trying to get at.
So I think that's kind of there. Now, the one I wanted to mention from Grafana Labs predictions, and again, they've come up with their own, again, link in the description, guys. Open telemetry will become the universal standard for the telemetry data collection. Now, I've been waiting for this for years, since really Open Telemetry or OTel came out. And I really want to see that happening this year. And for the OTel team to actually adapt Open Telemetry to adopt this whole Gen AI and auto remediation stuff that we've been talking about. Get it to the point where you're saying, I think this is what you should do, Dynatrace, or I think this is what you should do, Prometheus, and then leave it to the actual tools, Datadog, Big Panda, whoever it is, to actually then say, yes, I will take that action, or no, I'll ask the user first to see what they want to do. Yeah. Or if that's kind of automated already, yes, the user told me to do that, so I will do that. Thank you, Open Telemetry. I'll go do that. Right. But I want Open Telemetry to take it to that point, not just to say, oh yeah, we now have Gen AI built in, or now we can monitor Gen AI, as we've been saying, that sort of juxtaposition there. But I actually wanted Open Telemetry to take it to that level, to say, you should now go and take an action on this. That's the recommendation from OTel. Yeah, and then it's down to the tool from Big Panda, Dynatrace, Datadog, whoever it is, to take it from there to its logical conclusion.
I think there's probably a step that comes between that for this year, which is making sure that the vendors really do double down on Open Telemetry as the way in which they ingest the original data. Because we've still got a situation where, people are getting, SDKs, or they have their own particular APIs for getting data, ingesting data. And you think, no, if we're going to make this sensible, everybody needs to go down that Open Telemetry route. And then I think you can start saying, all right, now take it to the next level.
Agreed. Okay, let's move on to the fourth category, which was cloud repatriation and sovereignty. Now, we're going to have a field day on this because we picked up on so much stuff. But I think the message for cloud repatriation And our usual sort of objections to that really still stand. We've not yet seen sort of a proper, cloud repatriation. But I think what's going to happen is that this year it will morph to certain elements of sovereignty. Now, I'll explain why that is, because cloud repatriation kind of indirectly says, you're by kind of taking things in, you're kind of ticking some sovereignty boxes as well, because you've taken that workload in-house, you're running in your own data center or a managed service or colo or whatever it is. So I think default by doing that, for either an alleged cloud repatriation or an actual sovereignty requirement, you are essentially achieving the same thing, which is kind of, avoiding that sort of vendor lock-in. Now, if you look at it from a sovereignty point of view, I would look at that as an attempt to do some cloud abstraction. That's essentially what you're doing when you're trying to avoid vendor lock-in, right? From a sovereignty point of view, it's a cloud abstraction. You're taking away from the cloud, from the hyperscaler, from the public cloud, a whole bunch of services and things that you're doing, whether it's at the kind of the control plane layer or the actual application layer. You're taking those out of there. Because you're taking them out of there, obviously you're not locked into that vendor anymore. And that allows you to kind of create this cloud abstraction layer. I will try and provide a chart on this somewhere on the screen, which I have advocated for elsewhere. And this allows you to, gain control over a lot of the activities that you've been doing so far within the cloud environment. So that by default gives you kind of a checkbox or two in that sovereignty space. But I'll stop there and let you make a comment, Paul.
Well, I mean, yes, sovereignty is growing as a topic, and we're seeing all the hyperscalers announcing more and more sovereign clouds, I think is probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
For me, the issue is around data, is not around the control plane. I think the issue is around data and what happens to it. That's what's driven it. That's where people get really uptight. Where does my data reside? Who can get to grips with my data? It came out of public sector probably most strongly first, but it's sort of grown in intensity. And in today's sort of political climate, global political climate, it's got a head of steam in it. But to me, it's a data thing. But I always find the whole issue of sovereign clouds slightly bizarre in the first place, because the cloud is not a place.
Yeah.
And even if you have a sovereign cloud, how do you make sure that when you have the communications, you don't have somebody hack into the car?
Yeah.
There's too many different ways in which that can be minimum. The whole impact of sovereign data is just lost. We are totally globally connected. I find the whole area slightly strange.
You can't really have a sovereign internet, can you?
No. So
I
think,
work.
and you can't really have sovereign clouds, I don't think. But it's almost, in my sense, a sort of a non sequitur. It doesn't really follow.
Yeah.
Having said that, of course, the whole sort of clamor around, what's going on with data privacy and breakdown of international law, all those sort of things, means that you're going to get more of this. You will get more of this in 2026. But I think it's one of those. It's a sticking plaster. I don't think it's really doing anything particularly useful.
Yes.
You couldn't do with what you were talking about, the control plane and managing that, because you're going to be open to the same sort of issues. And so it's just another opportunity for the big hyperscalers to say, hey, it's okay, I've got a data center in
a solution.
the country. Yes.
Yeah. So there's a lot here to unpack, and obviously we're not going to get a chance to, to do that within this particular category. I think the main point here was just to say that, that sort of what was termed as cloud repatriation is kind of probably going to morph into certain aspects of, cloud sovereignty for this, and sovereign AI, which is another sort of area as well. So we'll see probably a lot more sort of focus on sovereignty and elements that we were, people were saying they wanted to do in cloud repatriation actually surfacing in the sort of sovereignty space. And as we said, things like vendor lock-in kind of becoming a cloud abstraction approach. Now, whether the merits of that's a separate thing, but in terms of sovereignty, you're right, it's data. The other thing is operations, which we've again mentioned in the past, and compute, of course. So those are the three things. Now, how do you actually achieve that, as you said? I think that's a kind of a multifaceted, multi-layered, hierarchical sort of debate that can be had, and we'll probably have that debate separately. But yes, again, you're right in terms of everybody's jumped on the sovereignty bandwagon. So you've had the announcement from AWS for the European Sovereign Cloud, or ESC. You've had a similar announcement from Microsoft, the Azure Sovereign Cloud. IBM announced recently, actually in the same week as I think AWS, IBM Sovereign Core. I have no idea what that is. It kind of seems to be more focused on software. Again, we'll maybe look at that in the future. Google has been doing sovereignty. So the Google Sovereign Cloud with T-Systems, my boys. They've been doing that for a number of years. We've been doing that with them for a number of years. So Google Sovereign Cloud. And obviously other vendors as well, all throwing in their sort of their hat into the ring as far as this is concerned. And this is kind of all happening at the same time. Now, there's also been some standards announced. I think the EU announced a sovereignty standard. It I have to say it was like based on an A4 piece of paper, so not hugely detailed as far as I know. But again, we may have a look at that in the future. And then you've had things like entities like Eurostack, which I think seems to be, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it seems to be a consortium of securing, says we are there to, well, their description says securing and deploying core tech for Europe's autonomy and resilience as a grassroots initiative. Now, I can tell you, there's no love lost between Eurostack and AWS. Eurostack's response to the AWS ESC, the European Sovereign Cloud, was Europe does not, and I quote, Europe does not need sovereign hyperscalers. And then they go on to slag off the AWS ESC for a whole bunch of negatives as to why it's not the right choice. So it is. So they say digital sovereignty is not digital. Data sovereignty, sorry, is not digital sovereignty. So they say it's not it's architected elsewhere, is controlled elsewhere, strategically aligned with non-European interests, economically extracting value out of Europe. So there's a whole bunch of negatives that they put around AWS ESC, and I'm sure they'll probably do the same thing for Microsoft's Azure Sovereign Cloud as well.
But again, that whole mindset is going to ensure that really doesn't fly. It's almost like, oh, we're going to, it's Little Englander, if I can sort of that old term again. Everybody's very inwardly looking and focused. And in this world, that ain't going to fly.
Well, that's been, that's been sort of the isolationist aspect of it has always been there. This is before this sovereignty. I think this is what this has done, is A, expose that, and B, bring it out to more to the surface, really. I think that's what we're seeing. But yes, as to whether they can achieve that, and I don't know how you can achieve that, because there's other, even, in T-Systems, we do the open sovereign cloud, which is, open source based. But, there's a lot of kind of how are you going to do that when your processor is from the United States, your chips are from the United States, and your open source projects are from the United States predominantly?
Yeah, and if you take it to the nth degree, and if I use a much more real world and slightly old fashioned analogy, it's the difference between having, the latest, greatest, Toyota, Nissan, Ford, or whatever, or a Trabant.
Yeah.
Because you get to that point where you're so inward looking and you're so short on capital investment, and just ideas that it's it's not workable. I
Yeah.
just find the whole thing
Yeah.
nuts.
Oh, I'm certainly not going to be driving a Renault anytime soon. So there you go.
Excuse me, I do drive a Renault.
I'll leave that to you, Paul. You're already sovereign, as I can see. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so this whole kind of space is moving fast. We are going to probably spend a bit more time on it, folks. So we'll try and do that. Again, there's a ton of description stuff here, lots of links in the description. So we'll again supply with all those. Let alone things like the AI Gigafactory, AI Industrial Cloud has all been announced by Deutsche Telekom T-Systems. Sovereign AI, which seems to be a generic term that's coming out. This is very close to what I was advocating for last year, which was what I was calling the MIDS, MIDS, or Model Inference Data Sovereignty. It's actually making sure that your AI model is sovereign. And that's not just for sovereignty's sake, but that's actually just for security's sake. You're just protecting your data and make sure that you're checking the box for for compliance and things like that, especially in regulatory or heavily regulated market sectors as well. So there's a whole bunch of that happening. There is a sovereign AI framework chart available. Make that available, or in the description. Will be in I'll link in the description of the video. It goes by country. It's kind of a little bit subjective, not really sort of a standard. But again, we will try and cover that type of stuff going forward on class setup, maybe some other categories of the or other segments of the channel as well. Okay, so on to Supercloud / other category. Paul's choice. For me, number 5, Supercloud. I just see, because we're kind of doing all this kind of sovereignty stuff, and with doing things like multi-cloud and so on, we'll see a lot more of these tools, which I have been keeping an eye on over the last couple of years, sort of really bubble to the surface a lot more as people kind of do more, hybrid clouds, multi-cloud sort of solutions and so on. So things like Stack Guardian, HPE's Morpheus, Hexaware, Fluid Cloud, TDS, Emma Cloud, or Emma.ms, or Emma Cloud as I would call them, sort of appearing in that category, that Supercloud cloud abstraction category that we talked about, Paul. And also may be powered by the likes of Crossplane, Crow, Spacelift, Kyverno, these kind of, CNCF open source projects that are sort of appearing as well. And they're all looking to address, things like Crossplane, for example, addresses multiple Kubernetes clusters. And it doesn't really care where those clusters are. They could be in public cloud. They could be, OpenShifts running in your own data center or whatever. But I think this Supercloud kind of requirement is going to come in a lot more this year, simply because of these things that we're having to do, whether it's sovereignty requirements, whether it's, herding our AI models and AI agents, or whether it's just, hey, look, I'm in multi-cloud. I've been in multi-cloud a number of years, and it's just too taxing to run 2 different types of tool sets. So is there a way for me to combine and address both of these clouds that I'm in using one type of tool set, or ideally one UI? What's your take on that, and whether anything else that you wanted to bring into category 5?
Well, I think very much what you've just mentioned there, which is this idea of making it easier to manage that multi-cloud environment, or manage the hybrid cloud environment. I think, if it does that, it's gone a long way down the track. to being a really useful set of tools. I hate the term supercloud. It just sort of, but I don't know what else to call it. So I'm giving up worrying.
Supercloud.
I've given up worrying. It's a bit like, can that's I can't hold back the tide of supercloud. But
Yeah.
I think but the also this idea that it provides that it stops the sort of lock into a particular type of cloud vendor. The argument I always have here is that you just move the lock in somewhere else.
Mm.
As the more and more you abstract away from from the underlying infrastructure, the underlying applications, you just create another level at which you're locked into. But again, I think we've talked for a lot, not just last year, but over the last few years about particularly things like Kubernetes, how transportable are they between the various hyperscalers. And I think if they can get over that one, and they can make life easier to manage, rather, as you say, the multiple, then I think and if we're still having this discussion at the end of 2026, I shall be very disappointed, I think, is because there must be organizations out there screaming to say, give me a way of managing this simply, because at the moment it's not.
Yeah, well, I agree, and that's why I think I don't care what you really call it. It's just a lack of a better term right now. Supercloud. Stack Guardian, I know, have been doing this, and I'm hoping to actually get them on the channel for this. It'll be really cool to see a demo from them. Now, HPE's Morpheus, which they acquired a while back, seems to do something very similar. I saw them at the Gartner IOCS conference last year, and I actually spoke to them, and they scanned my badge and they said, we will be in touch. And I haven't heard from them since. So HPE, I don't know what you guys are doing. Are you spending all that money being at that conference? Are you collecting all that stuff in marketing? Get in touch, because I'd love to see a proper demo of their capabilities and maybe kind of dive deeper into their Morpheus platform. But I think these will come up. They need to come up because they're really important for those reasons. Whether it's that sort of sovereignty requirement, whether it's that AI kind of herding your agents and having some kind of way of being able to provision them once they've been confirmed that they can actually kind of go about and do what they're supposed to be doing for you on your network. Or indeed, just as I said, I'm just, look, guys, I'm in 3 clouds here, and how do I want to deploy Kubernetes here today because it's cheaper than over there. How do I do that? I don't want to go into the tools of that specific vendor to do it. Or I can, but maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I kind of want to have some kind of a super layer on top to be able to address multiple clouds at the same time and be able to provision stuff as I see fit into whichever cloud I want to at that particular point.
I mean, it should make a huge amount of release a huge amount of value inside organizations, because at the moment they either haven't got the skills or they haven't got the time to do this one properly. And I think if you can get that, it'll be the biggest step they can make in 2026.
Agreed. Okay, so let's move on to category 6, which was cloud security and networking. Now, I picked up a couple of points on here. I'll let you come in, Paul, in a second. The one I kind of really picked up on was around cloud security from Aviatrix. Doug Merritt, I think, from Aviatrix, I'm not sure what his role is there, but there was an article called Embrace the Chaos, and the chaos being CHAIOS, which I quite liked, the way that they kind of weave that into the word. So cloud security in 2026 basically is kind of predictions for 2026 by Doug Merritt. Now, I think there's probably about 3 points that I picked up on there. First point, fragmentation across 4 generations of cloud workloads creates security challenges. Completely agree with that. And we'll maybe dive into what the generations are, but mainly it's kind of virtual machines and containers and functions, on serverless and obviously AI workloads. I think those are the main four. Number two, legacy security approaches are inadequate against modern cloud complexity. Again, yeah, I would agree with that. So things like, CNAP postures and scanning, CNAP posture scanners and repurposed legacy firewalls. I don't think anybody should be doing that. I can't believe actually people would be doing that, but there you go. So that was the second point that was made. And then the third one is the essential solution is a unified security abstraction layer. Here you go, Paul. Security abstraction layer for consistent enforcement. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I'll let you come in on those or maybe some other points that you picked up on.
Yeah, again, that last one is probably key to what's happening here. But it sort of comes back to, I mean, the fact that we've moved so fast, that we've got all these holes now. I mean, it's the only way to describe it, all the holes in the system. And therefore, again, 2026 has got to be a year in which if you add agent orchestration and the whole idea of agentic AI into the piece too. If we haven't found a way of doing that abstraction and saying, I almost see that as a sort of business imperative, not so much a technology imperative. You really need to look at what are my requirements in terms of data security, data integrity, everything. And it's about your own business or your own, government information or whatever it is. It's at that level, because at the moment, everything you've just described is quite technical. And actually, it can be as technical as it likes, and it could be as but if it's not plugging the issues, because actually the organizations that are talking about it haven't got a clear idea of where the threats lie and what the impact is on their businesses or their organizations, we'll be nowhere. So to me, it's almost with yes, okay, we've got the capability to start thinking about it now, but we've got to make that discussion meaningful to the people who run businesses and run organizations, because unless we get them to understand and divvy up the funds, if you like, to do it, and the focus to do it, we're constantly going to be hitting all these issues that we've been seeing, and it'll get worse rather than better.
I agree. And I think the missing piece here for me, again, continues to be networking. There's very little focus on that. You and I have, highlighted this before. Apart from a handful of vendors in this space, it's still very much underrated. And considering some of the outages that we experienced in cloud last year, I don't see, even Aviatrix is not really kind of saying a great deal about that side of it. They seem to kind of shifted their networking capability into more of a sort of a security type of the security aspect of networking, not the predictive or management or flow or anything else in a traffic kind of approach, to networking, and the mapping of networking. Where did this IP packet go? If we talk about sovereignty, and you were talking about data, and you said the whole world's kind of, connected together. Okay, when I press send on this, on this button, I want to know exactly where that packet went to. Can I do that over the internet using my sovereignty and Aviatrix tools or somebody else's tools?
And it is incredibly hard to do. I mean, you talk to the guys at Thousand Eyes, part of Cisco.
Yeah,
it's an incredibly difficult thing to do because it's such an ephemeral. It changes so rapidly. We've made it software defined, and therefore, when it goes into this sort of pot in the middle, actually tracking it through is nigh on impossible.
The ball of mud
has moved away a little bit. They suddenly realized how difficult that is.
The ball of mud that we mentioned in an earlier episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. All right. I think, so I think, I mean, again, links for the aviatrix stuff is there. I can't remember actually, Paul, if I picked on anything else here. I think there was something else here. There was a kind of a more cybersecurity predictions for 2026 by a guy called Jason Lau. I might actually be covering that in a separate episode or a separate video, actually, that I'm doing with somebody else. But I will include the link in the description for Jason Lau's sort of cybersecurity predictions for 2026. I have to say, again, I'm not a fan of cybersecurity term itself. I'd rather just say, security or cloud security, and then sort of networking or cloud networking or cloud network management, or, as I like to call it. That's kind of a better term for it. But yeah, I'll include all of that for you guys in the description of the video. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Okay, so our next category, Paul, is open source software and cloud native. Now, I didn't actually pick up a great deal in this category, believe it or not, but there were some predictions that people were making, and we'll maybe kind of come in with our own projections after we go through. So ZDNet had a Linux Unstoppable in 2026 sort of list of predictions. And then immediately afterwards, Linux Insider said, open source in 2026 faces a defining moment. So you couldn't get any more juxtaposition and difference in those two. And then again, there was some more stuff, I think, from another one, which I think it was actually more ZDNet stuff, but that was kind of more around sort of, Linux growth and UIs and, Firefox kind of facing severe decline, which is kind of more the client side, not that interesting. Did you gather anything else in this category?
Not really. I mean, the one that was surprising for me was even the thought that anybody has to say that Linux is unstoppable. I mean, it's surely now the de facto environment for pretty much everything cloud.
Yeah.
So it was a strange one, but yes, the only thing I sort of drew the line at was this, and until I sort of read it in more detail, was this sort of Linux growth in the desktop. And of course it's growth in the desktop for developers really, and sort of, technical people. It's not, you and I have had one or two conversations in the last few months that says, Windows isn't going anywhere for the average user, or even the average enterprise user. It's not just, those of us at home, it's the average enterprise user. And, it will be the dominant force in desktops and laptops for some time to come. But there was this sort of, secondary line that said, oh, it's for, for developers and sort of technical staff. Yeah, okay, I get that. I don't know what your take on that is. I can't say I've got a comment, but I wouldn't have thought Linux is going to be a big challenger to Microsoft in the client side. I really can't.
Yeah, I think what's happened most recently, and this is literally the last few months of sort of 2025 and now into 2026, is there has been a little bit of a backlash on the latest version of Windows 11, where advertising and we want to siphon all your data off. Oh, so you forgot to switch off that option? Sorry, that's all your data gone, type of thing. Oh, we did a, second half 2025 update and forgot, we switched everything, all the telemetry back on again without telling you, type of stuff. I think there's been a bit of a backlash around that. I don't really think it's as big as people are making it out to be. And you're right, it's that sort of potentially that category of, enthusiasts, technical, people in IT basically who kind of, can go through the steps and do an update or do a dual boot or something like that. And don't forget that switching to Linux doesn't mean they've got rid of Windows. It could be a dual boot, and nobody's taking stats on that. So anybody who's actually going to go at Windows, do give me some statistics if you know them about dual boot, because that's really interesting. But there has been, and don't get me wrong, I mean, there's some really good Linux distributions now, which will overcome most, not all, but most of that kind of, oops, there's no device driver for what you're trying to do. Or you're trying to play an MP3 file, sorry, you're going to have to download and unpack this thing, and it's a third party, whatever, and compile your own, that kind of thing. That sort of stuff, I think, has mostly gone away. But there are certain corners, I think, of the, of the apps world where that still exists, and you still have to kind of, manually knit everything yourself for it.
I suppose the big question from my point of view, and looking at, and this could have an impact, moving forward, is how far it makes the, if you like, the user journey simpler to have it Linux end to end, as opposed to having a Windows interface. It does it. I'm not sure it does. I'm just positing that as a potential. Because if it suddenly becomes the sort of de facto way in which AI in particular, but the user interface changes and the underlying operating environment for that is Linux rather than Windows. Now that could be a significant change, and one of the things that they're looking at is, this idea that with AI now, your interface might be not so much moving from keyboard to touch screen, but from keyboard to touch screen to voice. And does that require, will that enable a completely different client device operating environment that's probably Linux? I don't know, interesting one, but I don't see that happening in 2020. If we're doing 2026 predictions, I think that's a long way out yet.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a lot of threads, and maybe we should just do like a separate chat in regards to that, because that's just, I think, perennial and sort of quite relevant anyway. But for I guess for millennials, it's, they've grown up with Windows and Macs at work, right? So if we stick to the client side, let's stick to the client side and the sort of the OS side for a minute, and then we'll go maybe a little bit on the enterprise side of things. But just on that client side and OS side, the millennials are kind of used to, Windows. That's might be the corporate standard, invariably, and maybe a little bit of Mac OS thrown in for good measure. The kind of the Shoreditch crowd and people like that. So that kind of space is really used to those. They're not really used to Linux. Now, yes, there are pockets of, this health company, this branch of government in Norway or somewhere, went fully LibreOffice and Linux and whatever, and dropped all the Microsoft stuff because they had a tiff with Microsoft or the US government or something. Yeah, sure, there's a pockets of that, but I think the majority, and the underestimated majority, is really the enterprise. And you're not going to waltz into Deutsche Telekom or Deutsche Bank or HSBC or any of those guys and say, yeah, we're replacing your 11,000 Windows 11 machines with LibreOffice. You might get lucky that it will open your docx document properly with no formatting problems, and all the fonts will work as well, guaranteed, or might do, or may not do. It's just an impossible scenario. I don't see that. So even if the consumer was, convinced with Linux Mint or Ubuntu or something like that, and like I said, those are fairly decent distributions. I've got no problems with those. But just that, I think, last bastion is going to be the enterprise. And Microsoft will continue to develop Windows simply because, the enterprise says, I need Windows 12 now, please, or whatever you're going to release next, because they're the ones who are actually kind of driving a lot of the change, the updates, and things like that. Now, if Microsoft does cheese them off with advertising and things like that, sure, there is ways for them to switch that off with group policy and whatever. The Windows admins can do that relatively easily, because everybody in corporate tends to build their own Windows image anyway. They don't just go and get the one off the shelf from a PC shop or something. So but if they do take that too far with the corporates, then that backlash, I think Microsoft will certainly pay attention to, if not the consumer backlash. I think that's happening in that. But like I said, having said that, millennials are kind of used to Windows and Mac, and now the Gen Zs of the world, what do they use? They use iPhones, they use Android, things like that. So even they would not necessarily look at Linux to switch to. They'd probably want to say, well, can I just not run it all on my phone or my Android tablet or something, right? And they would kind of want to, bring their own device type of thing, and and work that way.
Yeah, but it's back to it's back to developers and programmers, all those sort of areas, because most other people see their apps. I mean, if you're working on an iPhone or an Android, and just using an Outlook or something, it looks the same on all of them. Or you're using any of the sort of apps you get from from the Android store, from the Apple store. Actually, when you're using them, they're no different. The user interface is the same. So it's only people who are interested in some form of programming development, or of the desktop environment, who maybe think, well, there's a different way of doing this. I think the average user is going to want to see his or her apps appear in exactly the same format, whatever the underlying application or whatever the underlying operating system is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, my sort of projection is this, that Microsoft may lose a few more of those technical, users of Windows 11, and then I don't know. I know that they've done a lot of backtracking in the past, like Windows 8 and and so on in the past. So I don't really see that being a problem for them. I think it just might be. It will just get to a head with with the enterprise customers perhaps. And certainly, I think the Windows 8 backlash was a lot of enterprises at the time, not just users saying, "Where's my start button?" But there was also the enterprises saying, "Yeah, actually, we do need that start button. Thank you very much." And then Microsoft, kind of said, "Oh, yeah, okay, we'll bring it back. Whatever the next version was." So, yeah. So I'm not really. I think it has probably lost a bit of percentage just due to these kind of recent bumps, but not. I don't think that the predominant kind of share and percentage is still with Windows, definitely, and will continue to be. The one I think that I find absurd is and I think I've mentioned this before, is the fact that a lot of these kind of open source people advocate for open source and Linux and whatever, yet you see them walking around with Apple, Apple Macs under their arms. And if the irony there is just unbelievable. The hypocrisy, I think, there is really unbelievable, because Apple is the most closed ecosystem and walled garden that you can get into. Yeah, here's all these Ubuntu users. Oh, I'm running Ubuntu on a Mac. Why? Why don't you just run it on an x86 machine or a Chromebook? Chrome OS, right? If you're kind of into that sort of stuff, then that's what you should be using, surely.
But you can't get over the fact that most people, when it comes to what they use in their own sort of personal world, is still down to the image it portrays of themselves.
Yeah, do as I say, don't do as I do, kind of.
Yeah, why do white van men have Mercedes vans as opposed to Ford Transit vans?
Yeah, Ford Transit vans. Yeah, exactly.
It's the same. It's the same issue. God bless the consumer marketing environment.
Exactly. Now, on to the more enterprise side, and a bigger fish to fry for open source is this licensing problem, right? So we've seen a lot of this over the last sort of 2-3 years, where open source vendors have changed their licenses to the Bustle license, the BSL license, to various other ones. I have covered this, guys, in the past as well, so do check out some of the other previous videos. If I do dig up the links, I will include them in the description of the video for you as well. But yeah, there has been obviously that. And I think that is a bigger fish to fry they need to be focusing on for 2026 and beyond, because I saw very little focus on that. I mean, it might be a kind of a swan over the kind of, or duck over water kind of thing, where the swan is kind of paddling crazy under the water and you can't see stuff that's happening. But I've seen very little in the public kind of in discussion in regards to that. Certainly at things like CNCF events like KubeCon and so on.
I mean, the question I had when I was looking at this was, because it's gone mainstream, because enterprises are using it heavily, because there's all the pressure on, staff resource and all those sort of things, the idea that you're going to have to, potentially maintain your own, version of Linux or whatever, the fact that you want enterprise level maintenance and support and upgrades and all those sort of issues just screams at you. You need to find a slightly different, licensing model to enable you to do that. And it obviously grates, if you like, on the sort of idea of open source of being sort of, completely, free to use. But then you think, well, how do we maintain this?
Yes.
And that's the issue, really. And with it going mainstream, with it becoming, the way in which enterprises run their mission critical systems, based on what is underlying, an open source environment, albeit, whether it's Red Hat or it's one of the other ones, lots of different ways in which you have to pay for support. That pressure is just going to keep on growing. And I think it's, from a projection point of view, if some of the, open source companies haven't got themselves into that sort of, all right, we need to change the licenses thing, I think they will in 2026.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like I said, that is a bigger fish to fry than, other things. And just one last point on that kind of, conversion to Linux on the desktop side. I mean, that might be easy, like I said, for certain organizations or enterprises, but not everybody can achieve that. And I mean, the headache and the cost of that is just gigantic. But having, like I said, looked at the ZDNet Linux Unstoppable in 2026 predictions, just to have a quick look at that. So it says Linux desktop growth accelerates. Okay, yeah, we said that. Targeting X Windows users, and we spoke about that. AI influences development workflows. AI tools will increasingly assist in Linux kernel and open source development. So what does that mean? You're going to be vibe coding the Linux kernel going forward? We'll see.
Good luck with that one.
Yeah, good luck with that one. Security improvements deepen, so open source security, including kernel hardening and supply chain defenses, will be a major focus. I mean, supply chain, definitely, I see. Rust expands its Linux projects. So Rust's use in parts of the Linux ecosystem will grow. I think it's actually already, I'm not an expert on this, I think it's actually already being used in the Linux kernel. So a lot of development is being done in Rust and coexisting with C language. Immutable and secure distributions gain traction. Any idea what's an immutable distribution, Paul?
Well, one that doesn't change, but apart from that, I'm not sure I could tell you exactly what that entails. But
yeah,
while everything's changing around you in terms of software and businesses are changing, the idea that the underlying environment is immutable, i.e., never changes. So I suppose you have a solid base on which to put your applications, your operating system, and all those sort of things. That's my assumption, but I haven't studied it enough, because we've been so looking at the mutability of the world around us at the moment that having somebody come up and say, you've got an immutable infrastructure, well, I'd have to unpack that, because at the moment, you need mutable infrastructure, because it's going to, what you're doing today with infrastructure is going to change tomorrow. And how does that impact your costs, your capital versus operating costs, all those sort of things, that says I need to be much more flexible with my underlying infrastructure, which seems to go against that.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 points I think that they're making here. So immutable and atomic updates model. So immutable is focusing a lot more on the Linux kernel being read-only. So actually, you can't mess around with the Linux kernel.
Okay.
Now, does that mean the Linux kernel or just Linux kernel? Because you could potentially kind of create a two-tier type thing. We're used to two-tier stuff in the UK. You could be creating a two-tier kind of approach here to the kernel. So where there's really read-only, and that's kind of the core kernel, if you want to call it that. And then there's like an outer kernel where you can mess around with that and whatever. And then there's the actual Linux distribution wrapped around that as well. So that could happen. But they're just talking here, just to clarify, immutable Linux is where the kernel is essentially read-only. Now, atomic updates is even smaller updates than like a patch or a security fix or an update or whatever you would call them. It's like literally like very little kind of types of updates, very small updates.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but the sense I've got, and this is going back in sort of into the history of technology and computer updates and all those sort of things, is that if you don't have, if you don't have a firm interface between those, you talked about if you like, the kernel, the real kernel, and then the outer layer. Yeah, okay, that works. But that interface, whatever you call that interface and how you manage it, has to be consistent. Because the minute you mess around with that, you do affect the kernel. You can't.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the same issue that, like I said, Microsoft had with Windows 10 or whatever it was back in the day, when they didn't want to give CrowdStrike and people like that. In fact, it was the generation before that. It was the McAfees and Nortons of the world. They didn't want to give those guys access to the kernel. They said, we're just going to keep the kernel closed to everybody. Everybody just starts their service when the app services start, basically. Sure, you can be kind of priority maybe, and you get to start first and, scan the memory and scan whatever you need to the hard disk, boot sectors and whatever, if you're antivirus and so on. But we're not going to give you. And then the EU, apparently, as I dug up, little known information, said, no, that's a monopoly. You can't do that. So you have to open up the kernel. So that's kind of been this is back from those sort of, the days of where Microsoft wasn't kind of in trouble with the monopolies and what have you. Since then, they've allowed people like, these antivirus vendors to install their stuff in the kernel. And that's why you had CrowdStrike, putting in their little part of the code and disguising itself as a device driver, basically. And that's kind of been the updating module. And that's what caused the outage, the recent outage. So
I think, and as we come back that one, I know we spoke about that, but it's sort of right. It makes the point that if you allow people to come into whatever kernel, whatever operating environment, and change it, then things like security clearly, but just application updates. How the hell if I'm relying on a certain set of APIs or a certain set of the way the kernel works, and you've just changed it, my God, the chaos it causes for the application developer.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, guys, get real. I mean, and you go back, IBM were not good at keeping their operating system interface stable. They allowed all, usually their own engineers, to go down and tweak it. So you had multiple different versions of the IBM operating environment, which for the application teams was an absolute nightmare. I mean, you probably go back to your days in IBM.
I'm under NDA. I can't speak about that. After 20 years.
It's just, well, between you, me, and the camera, it's all
The camera.
right.
Yeah,
You tell
exactly,
me.
man. Don't worry about it.
It's all right.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So, and then the last point that they made was some legacy projects face decline. I wish they do, because they just keep coming back. People keep going back to OpenStack and stuff like that. Check out, by the way, guys, my Dead Tech series if you want to have a look at that. If you're watching this much later, there's probably a playlist on the channel. But these kind of insane, sort of projects just keep coming back over and over again. People just keep reviving them, and then there's an excuse. They go, "Oh yeah, we'll just go back to that project again." I'm going, but we moved on from a cloud operating system. That was the whole point of orchestration and public cloud and cloud native, and they just keep bringing them back and reviving them. But I wish they would die off. Yeah.
There is no more certainty in this world than if you say you're going to stop doing something, close it down, decommission it or whatever, that suddenly all the people who love that environment appear out of nowhere and go, "Oh, you can't do that.
You can't do that.
You can't do that." It's absolutely, and that's immutable. That never changes.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, so Linux Insider had a slightly more pessimistic view. It says Linux faces a defining moment in 2026. So open source becomes core enterprise infrastructure. Well, it's kind of been that really for a while, and it's been foundational across the enterprise. Cloud and AI, yes, I agree a lot more kind of in that space than anything else. Enterprise demand for governed open source environments rises. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's kind of a little bit more around. Says business will prioritize open source platforms with strong governance, auditability, and integration controls. So this is kind of the more recent sort of sovereignty requirements and supply chain guarantee and stuff like that, I guess. I mean, I don't know how you're going to do that. That's quite vague. How you're going to do the governance, of that. But anyway, funding pressure stresses open source sustainability. Yes, we know that because we've already said that a lot of them are changing to, things like the Bustle license, for example. So we're very much aware of that. And I guess that, I can project that will continue for this year. I think you'll see a lot more upset. You might even see couple of big name projects going that way, and that will really upset people, I think, for this year. It's going to have that community up in arms, which is good. So just to keep stirring the pot a little bit. AI native and agent ready databases gain importance. I think databases have never been kind of attractive in that way. They do a job, they're back-end kind of stuff, they just get on with it. If they change to AI native and they become agent ready, all for them, but they're still going to be in the background. Nobody's going to say, wow, I lead with my vector database.
Yeah, it's scaffolding. It's what we call scaffolding.
It's PaaS, right? Yeah, it's scaffolding. Yeah. Exactly. I do agree it will come on, but not because people have gone, oh my God, I need what's it called, that other database type? I can't remember. It's just, but I need 10 vector databases, for my AI project, or something else, related to that. I don't know. I mean, but yeah, the scaffold. You're right. Security of agentic systems now it will become priority. This is true because you and I think, have spoken before, and I've talked to you in our correspondence about an AI agent registry. Now, some people have mentioned similar type of stuff. Hey, we need to, we can't just leave these agents running around on our network doing their own thing. They have to be kind of registered, and have to give them permissions, and this is beyond telling the agent what to do, what the agent's job is supposed to do. This is its permission.
It's giving them their credentials. It's
Exactly.
the policy
Exactly.
management you've been talking about.
Exactly.
And without that, then businesses will be at risk if they allow that to happen without that.
Exactly. Graph database. That's what I was trying to remember earlier. But yeah, I mean, I agree on the agents. I think that definitely should happen. And the sooner that happens, the better. Having said that, as we've said again in our correspondence, AI agents for 2026 are going to be augmenting existing applications. That's my projection for the year. You're not going to have like 100 agents running around your network and going, "Oh, hello, agent, how are you?" and meeting each other on the. They're not going to do that. Nobody's going to let anybody loose on their network like that, even if it's in-house developed and and trained and blah blah blah. It's just not going to happen. It's going to be just like how we started with AI, Gen AI, over the last few years. Everybody just added that capability to their existing platforms. So if you're using Salesforce, now you've got Gen AI with it. If you're using Workday, now you've got Gen AI with it. That's how it's going to be, I think, for AI agents as well. It's going to be your apps with AI agent capability augmenting what you already have.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to start, fairly simply because we've got to learn as a race, I think, as people, to how to prompt these damn things to do the job. So you're going to start with fairly simple processes.
Yeah.
That can, because this stuff is not deterministic. If you've got a process that requires a single outcome every time the same way, you're going to have to put an awful lot of guardrails in to make sure that
exactly
it doesn't deliver you. The agent using Gen AI doesn't deliver you something that is completely wrong and puts the whole company into a difficult position.
Yeah,
it's a really good, and it's a series of podcasts that The Economist has been doing, but the first podcast they did was with the CEO of Sierra, who's also, I think, the chairman, non-exec chairman of OpenAI. So he's got a foot in both the Agentic AI camp,
right,
the Sierra piece, but also, and it's a worthwhile listen. I must admit, it's about 40 minutes. It's a really worthwhile listen, a very sensible approach to, the way he's seeing his customers start to use AI agents. And it is that simple approach that you and I have discussed. And if you get it to he says the rest will come, but at the moment, the danger is you run faster than you can, you start to try and run too fast.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the first of those guardrails should be that AI agents registry. I think that's where we need to really start with that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then it says, what else is here? So open source architectures expand in business applications. I guess we talked about Ball of Mud recently, right? And again, that's kind of maybe what that's referring to, that type of thing. And then ongoing licensing and openness debates continue. Well, we've just said that, right? So again, nothing new there. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm kind of okay with most of those. I don't agree with necessarily everything there, especially kind of around the Windows versus Linux thing. I think Microsoft will come to its senses at some point, just like they did with all their previous debacles of Windows 8 and what have you as well.
Yeah, I just think we're moving to an era where the term open source will be a little sort of meaningless in one sense. Because, yes, it's a bit like, because really where it's going to is a sort of what you're seeing in some of the sort of Gen AI models at the moment for end users is, there's a certain amount to use that's free, but if you want this facility or that facility, you're going to have to start paying for it.
Yeah, it's the open core or something, I think.
Yeah,
it
is. So yes, I mean, we probably won't change the term open source, but it's actually a very different looking beast than it was, 10, 15 years ago. Very different.
It's getting diluted, I think is the word I would want to use. I think where Linux is. And it was interesting, I think the Linux, not the foundation, but the committee or the community or whatever, recently agreed on a succession to Linus Torvalds. So if Linus, gets hit by a bus tomorrow or or decides to retire from kernel development, there's like a succession process in terms of what do they do, going forward. So that was quite interesting. But anyway, that's beside the point. But yeah, I agree, it's kind of getting diluted. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.